Well, good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to this second day in the second plenary session of the RSA annual conference. Delighted to see you, whether you're here in the main auditorium or whether you're in the listening room. My name is John Bachtler. I'm a professor in the European Policies Research Centre, which is at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow and at Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. It's my privilege to be chairing this session on the future of regional policy in Europe. As I think everyone knows, this discussion is taking place at a challenging time for regional policy makers, with more complex maps of regional problems, issues of underdevelopment and slow growth in some regions, questions of how to encourage innovation and competitiveness more generally, managing the impact of the green transition on regions and communities. And these and other challenges have been the subject of many sessions at this conference and will be today and tomorrow. Now, our panelists have the difficult task of designing and implementing policies to respond to these challenges. We're fortunate in having three highly experienced senior regional policymakers from Portugal, Germany, and Poland to discuss the current state and directions of regional policy. And let me introduce our three panelists. Immediately to my right is Duarte Rodrigues, who's a board member of the Agency for Development and Cohesion here in Portugal. And the agency is the main body responsible for both national regional policy and EU cohesion policy. Duarte has had a range of senior appointments in the regional development field, and he's deeply involved with the design and implementation of national regional policy, territorial cooperation, policy evaluation, and the negotiation of EU cohesion policy and its instruments. At the far end of our panel table is Renata Calak. Renata is Director of the Strategy Department in the Ministry of Funds and Regional Development in Poland. Renata is responsible for the coordination of national, regional and urban development policies and the design, implementation and evaluation of development strategies. She also has responsibility for key aspects of cohesion policy in Poland and is currently coordinating the work of Poland's presidency of the Council of the EU relating to cohesion policy, one of the difficult tasks in the EU at present. And in the middle is Raphael. Raphael is the Deputy Director General for Structural and Regional Policy in the DG for Economic Policy in the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy, which I think is the new name since yesterday, possibly. Raphael has held many senior postings in economic, structural and financial policy, not just based in Germany, but also in the US and Asia. He has responsibility for national regional policy and EU cohesion policy in Germany, as well as some oversight responsibilities for financial services. So, as I said, we have three very experienced policymakers for this session. The way we plan to organize this session is to have two rounds, one dealing more with policy challenges and issues and directions, and the second one focusing more on governance. We've asked each panelist whether they will make a brief introductory presentation or statement on the current state of play of regional policy in their country, what they see as the factors, the key issues going forward. And then we'll open things up for questions, for comments, and there'll be a mobile microphone, a roving microphone for those of you who are here in the main auditorium. But there's also the possibility, if you're in another room, of submitting a question or comment online, and it should appear on my laptop here, and I'll then read it out. So let's go straight on then into the first round, focusing on policy directions. And let me ask each of our panelists, starting with Duarte Rodrigues, on what they see as the policy challenges. Duarte.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you very much, John. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss this difficult challenge on regional policy ahead of us, with so familiar faces and almost a group of friends as a panelist. I will try to do a quick presentation on the challenge that I see on this approach in regional policy in Portugal in the EU context, but the idea is just to steer the debate, so I will skip some of the slides. First challenge in Portugal, the paradox of internal versus external debate. 90% of our internal debate is about how divergent we are internally, and 90% of our external debate, I mean in the EU, it's the problem of Portugal not converging. So we are really an outlier in terms of European context since the 2000. There are several explanations. I will skip that. But in the last strategy for Portugal 2030 that we adopted at the end of 2020, we took seriously this approach, saying that our mission is to improve external convergence while keeping territorial cohesion. So this is the same data from 2000 to 2021, either OECD or from their cohesion report, where you see that over this long-term period, in Portugal, in terms of GDP per capita, we are not converging with the European Union, while we have a strong convergence internally at the level of NETS 2. Fortunately, since 2016, we start an upward convergence externally, which leads, and this is a relevant discussion for the people of regional policy, in the large majority of the cases, it's not been possible to combine external convergence with internal convergence. There is a statistical effect on that, but there is more than a statistical effect. So in Portugal, we are starting an upward convergence, notably to the relevance of tourism, not only, but when you see the regions that are recovering or that are converging upwards, is Lisbon, Algarve, Madeira, and in a more Chase way, some industrial areas. So this is one of the most challenging approach for regional policy in Portugal. Of course, how to steer this competitiveness, innovation is really a driving force, and here the challenge is how to translate the best examples in each region to a more massive approach in terms of competitiveness of sectors, of firms. I will skip these detailed charts. Sorry for having some titles in Portuguese. Then there is another layer of the challenge is how to deal with the climate vulnerability of the country. We are a small country in terms of area, but we have a strong heterogeneity. So we are facing a huge challenge on the climate change consequences. Just to name a few, we have an issue with the fire protection in North and Central, where the forest is the most asset, while we have an issue on the water resilience in the South, in Alentejo and Algarve. So how to deal with that, it's quite relevant, and we can come back why we choose to have specific components in our RRP devoted to that approach. Then the social inclusion. We have relevant or reasonable indicators in terms of the performance in this area, but the question is how to have a just transition either in digital or in climate, so how to no left one behind in terms of these areas. This is some charts that we did from a report of monitoring the strategy. So we set a strategy in the last months of 2020. The idea is to set targets for 2030, and at 1/3 of the way, around 2023, sorry, we did a report and to say where we are in this long path. Lastly, the territorial model. Again, a small country, but a huge diversity, with the urban centers not only in the two metropolitan areas in the coast, Lisbon and Oporto, but also network centers that are relevant for this urban-rural linkage in the interior. And on the right, you have the evolution of the population, the depopulation movement in the last decade. But indeed, this map is really a mistake for the analysis, because while Portugal decreased population between 2011 and 2021, there is a huge shift since 2019 where the population starts to increase. So we come from 2011 year to 2021 year, but the question is, it's not a trend. It's like that. That means that Portugal increased around 100,000 population a year due to the migration effect, and this is quite a disruptive approach for the regional policy. Not only for education, for the new challenge, for the housing. So this analysis, when you see this census data, it's quite risky to build upon that. My last slides are about the governance, because I believe that for regional policy, governance is really the key issue. We had also in Porto in last December a very interesting debate that we promote on the future of regional policy about governance. And I will pick up some of these slides. The first about the geographies and some of the slides on multi-level governance regarding the challenge of Portugal. The first one is about geographies and scales. So we need to consolidate our geography for regional policy, and we need to decide if it's planned regions or not. It's not exactly the same. We start to do a process for consolidation, the planned regions, and to have five regions in the country for that, on our deconcentration process and on the future debate on the regionalization. The second is we need to have regional policy is about regions, is about urban, is about rural. We need to have a better consolidation of all these areas. And all these dichotomies that we discuss in Portugal. We have an interior program that at the end of the day is not about interior, it's about low density areas. So we need to have a better consolidation of this taxonomy. And mainly, we need to avoid an issue that we discuss in Portugal, like if it's relevant right now, and in my opinion this is not, the old dichotomies that we have littoral and interior, that we have urban and rural, that we are rich in poor regions. So today it's much more fuzzy than that, and the maps show it. The second about strategies. It's impossible to have a regional policy development policy without a strategy at the very beginning. Money should follow the strategy, and not strategies follow the money. It's a well-known quotation, but it's very relevant that we have a strategy. We have a national, we have a regional, we have sub-regional strategies for that. In orange, we put some ongoing projects that we are developing in order to do so, notably this report that I told you about. It's really crucial to have key objectives and to have a national strategy for regional development. We can come back on the discussion on that topic, but I think it's real key issue. In the strategy 2030, we put as a 4 axis, and on this report, we noticed that could not be the best way to have an additional axis for territory. So how to streamline is really challenging, but we need to try to do so. On the actors, so we have in the mainland, of course, we have an asymmetric decentralization. In the autonomous region, we have regions. In the mainland, we have the central government, the local government that are associated at the NUTS 3 level, the Association of Municipalities, and we have the CCDR, which at the regional level, we try to empower and to strong the concentration. So we are in the middle of this process. In all multi-level governance, the capacity is an issue, and we starting to implement either the roadmap for capacity building or the project with the CCDR in order to have a strong capacity actions for all the stakeholders, notably to manage the right expectation on the ongoing process. To see how challenging is the multi-level governance, I used to put some complex slides like this one. So you see in the x-axis the scale from local to EU, and you see in the y from monosectorial to multisectorial. So the actors in the mainland, of course, I skipped the autonomous regions. We have municipalities, Association of Municipalities, CCDRs, Council of Ministers, EU Council, and EU sectorial councils. When we talk about multi-level governance, we try to forget that we have from local to European level. So we need to take into account this approach. This is the actors. On orange, we have the several contractual mechanisms. Of course, the partnership agreement, the RRP, the agricultural fund, the strategic fund for agriculture, the medium-term fiscal structural plan. So it's a contractual agreement between the member state and the European level. Then at the national level, we start with these contracts between central government and CCDRs, while in the sub-regional level, we have these ITIs between regional programs and NUTS 3. And of course, we can go on. We have governance mechanisms that are relevant. Sorry for being very specific. Either territorial coordination council at the national level, the regional council in each region, the intersectoral coordination council that are relevant for this ongoing reform to have a more powerful CCDRs, the Regional Innovation Council to manage smart specialization in each regions, the monitoring committees. So this is the, I will skip the more detailed approach. This is the complex puzzle of governance, but we need to understand who does what and how to improve these governance mechanisms. Lastly, or almost lastly, the financing instruments. Again, it's not easier than the previous one. This is the financial instruments that the people on the ground dealing with regional policy needs to manage. Starting from the last programming period to the current one, and even to the next one, because we are managing to design the social climate plan that will be in place from 2026 to 2032. So again, the same logic, regional scale, on the Y, more short-term, more long-term. So, of course, we need to rationalize this approach. The strategy is relevant at the very beginning to have more synergies than overlappings, but at the end, we are achieving the limits of managing so many instruments. So this is, I think, a strong message for regional policy people, mainly in Europe. Lastly, we are drafting, of course, we are in the middle of this discussion on the future of cohesion policy. Cohesion policy is critical for regional policy all over Europe. And I will leave with 10 axes that, in our opinion, in my opinion, are quite relevant. I won't have time to discuss all of them, but just to quote a few, we need to have, again, a long-term strategy in advance. We need to have fewer instruments and common rules. Of course, I can speak long time on each topic, but I will leave for our debate. The DNA of cohesion policy is this fifth topic, so this triangle between shared management, partnership, and multi-level governance, and that's why I spoke so much about multi-level governance. It's the added value of regional policy for this competitiveness and resilience of Europe. The regional specificities, the cooperation, result orientation that go hand in hand with the simple, agile, and flexible, and the administrative capacity. jumping from last slide, jumping from Portugal to Brussels, from Porto or Lisbon to Brussels debate, some ideas that we have to discuss in this approach. We need to have a cohesion policy at the heart of the European governance model that nowadays is the European semester, but the question is how to improve the territorial dimension of the European semester. We need to have national strategic frameworks, so the role of each country having a national strategy for regional development, that it's not a replace of the regional, of the local, of the sub-regional strategies. That's much more a guidance and a compass for orienting this approach. Rethinking territorial instruments, they are relevant when the stakeholders knows very well in advance where to go. Having a territorial instrument just for having more flexibility, it's not just a very good idea in that sense. I will stop here. I'm out of the time, so, but ready to have a discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Duarte. Really interesting presentation, just to start us off and raising a lot of interesting questions. But let's go straight on to our second panelist, speaking from Poland, Renata Calak.
Thank you, John. Ladies and gentlemen, dear Commissioner, dear Professor, dear colleagues, for me, it's a very great pleasure to be here, to be part in this important forum for sharing the experience of the scope of regional policy in Poland. And as you can see in this slide, this is long distance between Poland and between Portugal. But I am here in Porto for the first time, and I can see that we have a similar challenges when we speak about regional policy, about cohesion policy as well. And for today's meeting, I divided my presentation into 3 parts. First, I would like to give you a general overview of evolution of regional policy in Poland. Second, I would try to describe you the decentralization process, which is quite important in our country, and in the end, the future of regional policy. But before I continue, let me tell a few words about the Ministry of Development Fund and Regional Policy, because this ministry was established in 2005 with the scope of managing European Union money. But currently, we are also responsible for regional development policy, developing policy as well. And I have been working in this ministry from the beginning, and I have an opportunity to even see how we change and how we make the evolution of regional policy, just from spending the European Union resources to create regional development system in Poland. This slide shows a lot of detail, but let me draw your attention to the fact that the last 25 years in Poland have been a time of dynamic changes in economy, in administration, and also in the policy as well. It was also a period of intensive work of implementation of the European Union money, but now also thanks to the European Union money, we have a quite success process of decentralization and also implementation European Union money, but not exactly. We have established strong system of regional policy in Poland. Because you exactly know when Poland joined the European Union in 2004, in the middle of programming period, the first money, the all money was managed at the central government. But very fast, based on our experience on the implementation of EU money, we began the process of shifting responsibility for programming and implementation of regional policy from the central to the regional level. Of course, this process wasn't easy and take a lot of time. In 2099, Poland introduced 16 directly elected and self-government regions instead of previously existing 49 regions managed by central government. And in this point, regions started to be responsible for preparing the strategy, for implementing the strategy, and also for using money to realize their objectives. And this is quite important that during the process of decentralization that also the government shift more money to the regional level. And you can see in this slide that gradually the region, the 16 Polish regions are responsible for more European Union resources. And also now regions are responsible for ERDF, ESF, and all allocation for Just Transition Fund. The next slide, how we build the decentralization process, but first of all, it was very important to build a multi-level government system. Duarte just explained this and showed this kind of graph with so many forums, so many relationships between the funds and how we can find our way in this complicated process. And in this way, this is quite important to coordination. And when we coordinate the regional policy, this also is important to involve all partners, because when we would like to create and make the structural changes, these changes involve a lot of tension. And on the board, we need all our partners, and of course, we need also evidence-based policy. And this is the reason that gradually we cooperate with OECD, World Bank, ORPA, and other institutions to support regional public administration to be able about deciding what they would like to do and implementing necessary resources. And the next slide show Poland and show also our polycentric development. You exactly know that in Poland we have the 16 regions and with quite strong capital city on this region. And it was the way that all regions implement ITI. And in the last perspective, we implemented 17 ITI, but in the current perspective, almost 100. And why is this quite important? First, it helps us to build functional urban areas. It helps us to build the linkages between the urban and rural areas. And also, it helps to coordinate the funds. And for example, in ITI in Poland, we use ERDF, ESF, JTF, and also national resources. And it was the way when people from the local authority, from cities, from region, and other partners sit together, decided what is important for them, prepare the strategy, and after use necessary resources to realize this strategy. And I would like to say that in this programming period, we have so many ITIs, and also it helped to strengthen medium-sized cities. And this is for us, this is the crucial role in balancing national development policy by acting and regional hubs. But of course, challenge for Poland is not only the spending money. For us, this is modernize our country, and of course, to do it and how to do it. This is quite important to create a good, effective regional policy for all Polish region. But you can see that. Now is quite a lot of new challenges. In Poland, we have a quite big regional disparities and also low level of competitiveness and low level of innovation. Doesn't matter how much money we spend, still we are not so innovative. And also this is the problem with demographic condition. This is of course the geopolitical problem close to our border, and also institutional capacity as well. And now we are thinking about new model of regional policy, and we are also thinking about new model on cohesion policy as well. And what is for us the crucial, what is the most important? The first of all, territorial approach. And of course, the regional policy is not only policy for poor region, but also for all Polish region. And regional policy has an integrated character. Of course, integrate of different policy and the national and regional level as well, and also coordinate national policy. And how to do it? And we try to create something like integrated approach to create the investment mix, focus on territorial make policy. And to be more detail, I can say that for us, still the key direction of regional policy, this is competitiveness, this is effectiveness and cohesion as well. For us, the competitiveness is the way how to strengthen the Polish region. Of course, cohesion, we would like to focus on strengthen the polycentric development in Poland. And effectiveness, we are focused on the capital administration in the regional and local level. And to do it, this all kind of three goals, we would like to strengthen resilience of our region. But to be more specific, we also try to find the investment which is exactly needed for a specific territory of Poland. And first of all, when we would like to strengthen the polycentric development, we decided which kind of city needs which kind of investment, and to be able to provide the necessary public services for our citizens. And we selected them, and now we try to find the necessary investment for them. But also we don't want no one left behind, and this is the reason that we also focus on the programming problems areas, which is very visible in the eastern Poland, but also the rural areas and also the region which are in the transformation process. But in conclusion, for us, the new model of regional policy is first of all cooperation, that we have to strengthen the multi-level government system in Poland. We have quite strong region, but also we would like to strengthen the local level as well. And in this way, we need the strong role of the coordination mechanism, and the ministry, our ministry, Ministry of Development Fund and Regional Policy, give us this opportunity because, frankly speaking, because we have a European Union resources on our hands, and we can more decided about good way on spending also national resources, and also use the European Union standard of using national resources as well, like evaluation, monitoring, etc. And the next is very important also the territorially oriented, the place-based approach and stress on investment mix necessary needed for one particular region. And next, integrated territorial approach focus on pro-development measures and strengthening territorial potential, and also competitiveness, result-oriented policy, performance-based sometimes is needed to use it, capital building, and also linkages between the urban and rural area, because now the rural area is changing in Poland. And in the end, I would like to tell that now we have a presidency in the EU Council, and we pay a special attention in the territorial aspect in our conference, in our seminar, and also at the political level. In March, the European Council adopted the conclusion about cohesion and cohesion policy, and I would like to strengthen in the cohesion, because we just explained a lot about the territorial approach in this document, and this is quite important to strengthen territorial approach to build resilience of our regions, our countries, and our Europe as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Renata. Another really interesting presentation, and you can already see a number of common themes starting to emerge. Let's go straight on then to our third panelist, Raphael.
Thank you very much, John. I'm delighted to be here. So within this wonderful Porto, I will follow a different approach. So I don't have slides. So I will try to convince you the old-fashioned way and give a short introduction about the German situation, because you just believe that we're not dealing with the German situation every day, regardless of the Germans here. But this is why I try to give you in a summary, what this German system is all about. It has also nothing to do that we have a new government since 2 days, and I don't want to put anything in writing to protect myself, so it has nothing to do with that. So the regional policy framework will not change, so quickly. So, but maybe as a start, if you look at the German system, it's very important to look, let's say, the constitution. Okay, the German constitution clearly states for everybody, regardless who is in power, that we have to pursue the goal of equivalent living standards. It's a very abstract term, and academics among us know there are libraries and bookshelves full of literature. How can we operationalize, define equivalent living conditions? It's an ongoing process, and maybe we'll have some debate about this later on this panel and with you. So it's important to look at that. So I will structure very shortly, because of time, my presentation as an introduction in four parts, I think, that gives you a better understanding about the German system. So, as the name says, we are a Federal Republic of Germany, so we are a federal country. So we have to look at the governance system. And it's very important when we talk about regional policy that we have this interaction and the cooperation between the different level of governance, especially between the federal level and the state level. So it's it's a very cooperative approach since the 1960s, basically, and I will give you some concrete examples, concrete policy measures, mechanisms we introduced. But this joint approach is very important because, as an economist, I would say it really ensures, for example, ownership and responsibility. And you have a joint, this is also part of this, let's say, cooperation, a joint funding system. So the various governance levels are basically part of the financing. So the federal government allocates 50% of the regional policy of the main instrument we have, I will talk about shortly. And the state level of governance allocates 50%. So we talk about a budget annually of around 1.3 billion euros. So from an economic point of view, whoever is, let's say, willing to allocate and invest, a certain amount of money, so it must be some kind of, let's say, seriousness or some kind of, economic effect related to this. So this governance approach is very important, and to have this kind of cooperation. The second one I would point out is, let's say, a rules-based approach, I would call it like this. Of course, you might think, RSA is inviting a German here, and of course, the first thing he talks about is rules and regulation, but I can tell you in this case, it's really justified to do that because this rules-based approach, the experience we have, this is, I think, quite successful. At least it works in practice on the ground. What's meant by this? I mean, rules-based, basically, that you have a kind of depoliticized process, that you have transparency, that you avoid rent-seeking activities of policymakers and politicians, that you have very low information and transaction costs when it comes to tackling discretionary policies, and so on. And what's also related to rules-based, basically, how do we define structurally weak regions or regions in need or assisted regions? I followed some of the interesting debates yesterday when in one session, you discussed left behind regions and how can we define them, how can we have empirical data to measure those areas. And this is the same situation in Germany. So we are basically defining in a rules-based approach those areas with right now 4 indicators. You have productivity, let's say, is a very mainstream kind of economic indicator, productivity measured by per capita. And then you have underemployment, let's say, is a labor market indicator. Then you have a future-oriented indicator that is, workforce projection. And you try to have let's say, a demographic aspect in there. And the last but not least, the fourth one is infrastructure. So you look at the infrastructure in certain regions, and then you get a map where you basically can color it out. And I think Germany, as I don't have to show it, that you get a map that kind of identifies regions according to their, let's say, economic development, and that's basically our groundwork, where and how to allocate money. And those indicators I just mentioned, okay, they have different, let's say, statistical weight. The first 2, productivity and the workforce indicator, they weigh around 40%, and the other one around 17 and 7%. So the debate we have right now, and this we might discuss this, if this is a right relationship, should we maybe have a different kind of, focus on different indicators? This is a debate we are having. So rules-based approach as number 2. Number 3 is basically that you have to think about the scope of investment, the scope of the allocation of funds, and you have to have an idea what are your economic and investment priorities. Okay, and this is very laid down. It's defined very precisely in what areas, what sectors you allowed, let's say, to allocate, public funds according to this, scheme. What we call the joint task of, economic improvement, the GRW in German, and this specific and the main, let's say, regional policy instrument is, defining those sectors very precisely. And of course, the debate we have right now, should we expand, let's say, the subjects of funding? For example, we have many regions that are confronted with other, let's say, issues we are currently facing. For example, transformation issues. So how do you define transformation? How can we operationalize and identify certain indicators that kind of grabbing this challenge of transformation. So we are middle of the process and discussion about this. And but the point is here, it's not, let's say, as we would say in Germany, hammered in stone. So I mean, it's a flexible kind of approach that you need to be flexible every few years to kind of adapt your indicator set up, in order to define and, do the right allocation of funds, in the, let's say, regions that need those funds. So rules-based, and I'm happy to answer questions about it because this is the current debate we have right now in Germany. And last but not least, I think very important, but also important characteristic of the German system is an adequate and early stakeholder involvement. So I mean, in some academic literature, out there, they're talking about social capital, and that is basically what's meant, that you really utilize social capital on the ground in the regions. Social capital defined in a very broad way, it's the business association, civil society, NGOs, labor unions, and that you try to organize a stakeholder participation process in order to get the regional, the local level involved, because I mean the notion of subsidiarity, I mean that basically the knowledge what's best for the region or for the local level is basically on that level, on that governance level. So I mean this is basically in a nutshell the framework where we are basically allocating funds into regional policies. Maybe one last and specific area, and I'm happy to discuss it also with you for the ones that are interested or working on lignite. So I'm also responsible for, let's say, the whole process structurally, regionally, when it comes to phasing out of lignite in Germany. I mean, until 2035, 2038, we like to get out of it, and we allocated 40 billion euros for those time period. And of course, you can imagine there are many challenges involved, how to implement this process of phasing out of lignite. And just for our debate, there's a very interesting and creative, discussion going on, again, coming back to those indicators, and I think that's affecting also my colleagues here on the panel and maybe many you academically that are working also, let's say, empirically on those indicators. What are the right ones? What are and how can we really, operationalize the ones that we as policymakers are able to work with those? So happy to discuss this with you. So far for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raphael. Well, we've had three very interesting introductory presentations from our panelists. A number of themes that have run through all of them. One is the complexity of the challenges that are faced. Competitiveness, climate vulnerabilities were among them. Secondly, interesting about how sort of place-based approaches are being interpreted. We're seeing different geographies emerging, also more emphasis on the local level. Emphasis also on the integration of policy fields, of funding flows, of investment mixes. Also rationalization of processes, more flexibility, simpler procedures. Key role for capacity building, that's been mentioned. And the importance of analysis, accountability, evaluation, monitoring, reporting came up a number of times. So we have some interesting issues that echo some of the debates that we had yesterday in the plenary and in the workshops. Okay, we've now got a bit of time for some questions or comments. We've already got some in the online. But let's pick up a few questions or comments. Anybody would like to start? Yes, in the front, and then here. Could you say, sorry, is the microphone? Yeah, it's coming. If you could just say who you are, and if you've got a question for one particular panel member.
Thank you. I'm Louis Dijkstra. I work for the Joint Research Center. Really enjoyed all three presentations. And one thing that struck me is that both Renata and Duarte also talked about the demographic dimension, and this is a topic which is getting more and more attention. And the challenge for a regional investment policy is, can it influence demography? It's such a slow-moving thing with a lot of personal decisions depending not just on infrastructure, but also on the family environment, on the support for childcare, etc. And we see a lot of long-term changes. The map Duarte showed with the changes in population close to the Spanish border has been going on for many, many decades. So my question is, how do you think, well, can cohesion policy respond to those demographic changes, and should it try to accommodate them, or should it try and fight them, knowing that some of these are quite difficult to change in the short term because they're also a structure of the age structure of the population and the long-term trends in fertility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis. And there's a question here.
Yeah, hello. My name is Susan Schäfer from University of Heidelberg. You presented some of the current challenges, and what I was missing a little bit was the rising populism in Europe. We see many populist parties gaining attention, and they have a very high share of votes, and I wonder whether this is a danger to the multi-level governance that is currently in existence, and how, I mean, what can be maybe done to bulletproof the kind of distribution and cooperation systems that we have, or is it something that you don't see as a necessity?
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else like to comment or question? Okay, we have one question online, which was yesterday we had a plenary in which it was argued that it is time to move beyond GDP. What's your position on this topic? Okay, let's give our panel a chance to respond to the three questions. Duarte, would you like to start?
Yes. I will try to touch briefly the three questions, starting with the last one on populism. It's of course a matter relevant for this kind of debate because we need to see what are, let me put in a different manner. There is a myth that regional policy and convergence is about having the same result in each and every region, and this is a problem of the policy. We need to understand what is the acceptable disparities in societal terms. That means, and leads to probably the question of Luis, how to deal with population and depopulation, and what could be the role of regional policy. In Portugal, we have a very relevant debate on the interior that at the end, in geographical terms, is not about the interior, it's about low-density areas, and what can regional policy do to that. And when you start, this is I will come back to some years ago. When you start our strategy that I explained, and that has indicators much richer than GDP per capita, there is the first agenda is about demography. And the major target in 2020, because the strategy was built between 2017 and 2020, the major target in 2020 is to mitigate the decrease in the Portuguese population. This was the target set in 2020. When you conclude the report last December, we noticed that we not just decrease the population, we are increasing the population since 2019, and a relevant part of the regional policies challenge on the ground are mainly due to that. So the idea on, and then try to reply to your question, what can regional policy do? Of course, we need to manage the shrinking of some regions, and this is a very, very difficult political debate. I am free to say that. We had a minister that, when she wrote an article in the journal, a minister 3 years ago, when she wrote an article in the journal about managing the population. So I was joking, saying if he wrote in English about shrinking regions, probably it was not such a problem. But in Portugal, in political terms, was a huge problem. Because we are not ready to manage that. So one part of the reply is how to manage shrinking regions that at the end of the day, even with this upward recent trend in population, we need to manage. That means, and it's a role of regional policy, that means to provide a minimum access to public services. Again, what is a society to accept as a minimum? And we need much more data on that. The Commission, the GRC is providing data on that. So what are the minimum access to an hospital, a school? We need to understand that. In Portugal, the way to organize was thinking that the municipalities are in some areas not just the right scale to have the Association of Municipalities to provide a better scale to that. And when you see this NUTS 3 level, that is the level of the Association of Municipalities in Portugal, we have in all of them a major urban center and the surroundings. So the urban-rural linkage can work on that approach. I'm not saying it's done. It's far to be done, but it's a way to have the right scale in terms of provision of public service. The other discussions that we have in Portugal about the role of regional policy in this demographic challenge is how to keep the right for people, the right to stay, the famous right to stay from Letta. Because at the end, it's about having access to services, and in some areas in Portugal, access to services much better in the low density areas than in metropolitan areas, which seems a paradox, but it is not. But the question of having jobs, so access to jobs and quality. And there has been a relevant policy to try to induce more investments from firms on innovation, on creation of jobs to the low density areas, with several mechanisms, notably with a positive discrimination on the incentive rate for this kind of investment supported by the EU funds. So I'm not saying regional policy is, after all this experience, is able to drive population trends, but of course it needs to be ready to manage with this population change. Lastly, on beyond GDP, we should split, in my opinion, the discussion on formulation strategies, monitoring regional development, and of course, regional GDP is not enough for that. Our strategy and the regional strategy has much more indicators. We have at European level innovation scoreboard, the European North Social Rights. So we have another compass to understand the regional development. Then it's a different discussion on the allocation method, where we should be as simple as possible, and then at the end, regional GDP is relevant. Even on regional GDP, and we are doing so that approach, either in the previous report or in the ongoing report on national cohesion report that we are elaborating, when you look in depth to the components of regional GDP, they are really rich. Just to give an example, we are, again, on a simple discussion saying that why Estonia has a strong convergence than Portugal or Latvia, and then when you compare the drop in population in these member states, I'm not saying it's not an increase in GDP, but I'm saying we should discuss if this is the right approach to be richer in terms of per capita, because we are losing 10 and 20% of population. This is a discussion that we had at European level, but also at the national level. We have in the south some convergence regions, mainly due to drop, and we have here in north, in this long-term analysis, there is just one NUTS 3 regions that were able to converge and increase in population. Was covered, mainly with the city of Braga as a center, but when you look in depth into GDP per capita and you assess the evolution of population, which is the role of more intensive labor use or more productivity, and then you understand that European regions, European countries, even the more developed, has an issue with the productivity because the growth over the last years and the convergence process are mainly due to labor intensive, and there are limits for that, notably to the population constraints, and I'll close the cycle. So GDP per capita it's like democracy. It's for sure not the best one, but for a simple approach, we didn't find anyone better.
Thank you very much, Duarte. Yeah, Raphael?
Yeah, I would just to add something. I mean, Duarte already pointed out some important aspects. I'd just like to...
Yes.
Oh, closer. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I mean, Duarte already said many important aspects. I'd just like to add maybe a few aspects, when it comes to the demography point. And you mentioned, let's say, the European level and the debate we have, for example, in the General Directors meeting when it comes to cohesion policy. In the debate, Ms. Ferreira, she knows this. I mean, the letter thesis about the right to stay, as you mentioned. And I always remember the comment of my Dutch colleague who said, yes, the right to stay is an important and interesting argument, but the reason to stay is also very relevant. So we have to make sure that people have a reason to stay, and that's what we're working every day also in this regional policy framework. And when it comes to GDP, as I mentioned in my introductory statement, of course, I mean, Germany's, of course, this beyond GDP debate is very clear. We introducing and working on alternative indicators. For example, we introduced something already, I think it's hard to translate into English, it's called the Daseinsvorsorge, so basically an indicator for public services. So to make sure, also that's related to the demographic debate, right? So older people have problems to have access to financial services, for example, or basic public services. And I think, and this has come back to the German constitution, to equivalency of living conditions, that you have to make sure that people at least have access to the basic services, and that's related to this demography problem. And we're also working on how to again operationalize this demography issue, in a, let's say, indicator setting that is kind of, getting this right. Last point to populism, yes, very, very sensitive issue, of course. I mean, I don't have the right answer. I mean, what's the real cause of populism, for example, in Germany? But I only know that regional policy cannot solve it all, I would say. And number two is it's beyond also economics. It's obviously some kind of alienation between, certain areas, certain citizens, and government levels. I just want to refer from a German point of view to a really important report that might be interesting for some of you in the audience. It's so-called the German Equivalency Report, published last summer. Over 30,000 people were surveyed, and I think at least you get an idea about attitudes of Germans. I mean, we had in one session yesterday, there was also the perceived, let's say, situation and the real one. And this equivalency report also is a reflection of the perception and what reality is. So it might be interesting for people that are also interested in data and working with raw data, which you can have access to. And maybe so much. And maybe last phrase for the populism, of course, if you allocate a lot of money, for example, in the areas that are affected by phasing out of lignite, especially in the eastern part of Germany, as I said, for the whole period, 40 billion euros. But still, those areas that received a lot of money and also, started, implementing very innovative projects, voted even more radical than 4 years ago. So I mean, so it's kind of, then we still have to find answers why this is the case.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. There is an English version of the General Equivalency Report. I'd encourage you to look at it because it's fascinating to see the perception of issues against the reality. Thank you very much. And Renata?
Populism. I think that regional policy and cohesion policy mitigate this process, and also decentralization, because in Poland we have a quite strong decentralization, and we create some kind of policy, no one left behind, and we invite all partners for this kind of game of development. And if you invite all partners, and sometimes this is not quite easy, and especially from the rural areas, but when they try to understand that we play in the same game for development and also using European Union money for this game and be part of this process, I think this kind of system mitigate populism. And I think this also the cohesion policy, this is the one policy which is very close to the citizen, and also that this is very visible at the local level, because when this is also some kind of tendency in the European Commission to centralize, and when even some big project is realized in one particular area, which is maybe have a kind of problematic area, but after this the people don't have some kind of connection with this project. Okay, this project they don't know even from which kind of resources, they don't have a relation with this project, they don't think that this is their project. And I think this cohesion policy, thanks to this kind of multi-level governance and share management, they give them kind of feeling that they are the part of this project as well, and this is quite important. And also in Poland, the decentralization, that we have a decentralized system of using European Union money, and this is quite, I think, the good feeling and the different level of Poland about, I think, the good feeling about the European Union as well. But when we think about demographic, of course, this is that big issue. But I think that we need to have a clear migration policy, because in Poland we have a lot of migrants and basically from Ukraine, and in one way this help mitigate this process as well. But I think that sometimes we have to speak more honest about migration and create quite clear policy on this. And this is also in the European Union level and this Polish level as well. This is kind of, maybe I can say, this is kind of connection with populist topic, because this is quite a tricky subject for some politician to say quite clear about migration issue. But on the other hand, it helps us with the demographic trend, which we can mitigate, but we couldn't change this trend. But GDP, and we just also thinking about some kind of indicators which give us the way of kind of showing the minimum access of public services. And this is also quite important when we think about demographic, but still in Poland we have a big regional disparity. Okay, this is, and also we have a quite disparity in the borders, with not only external border of Polish external border, but also borders between regions. And we try to focus on this. But I can remember that all the time we complain about GDP, but in the end we accept these indicators. But still, this is the issue to discuss.
Okay, Okay, thank you very much for those first round of responses. We're running slightly behind time, but I'd like to focus now a bit more on the governance issues. We've heard something about the governance issues in each of the countries, but perhaps I could ask our panelists to sort of pull out what do you see as the main governance challenge going forward, and maybe do invite our panelists in reverse order this time. Raphael, would you like to start?
As a main challenge, I mean, from a policy perspective, I would...
Governance, yeah.
A governance
yes.
perspective, I mean, I would look at the setup of the indicators. You know, I just mentioned how do we approach, you know, assisted areas and how do we define them. I mean, for example, and this is an ongoing debate, so it's not really fixed. So, for example, if we talk about, in a broader sense, of life quality, so, you know, you want to measure, you want to make sure that you have a decent level of life quality. I think there's an interesting debate we have, and we commissioned a study for that because we need to remap our areas by 2028, right? So we have a set of indicators, but we want to be ready to face, let's say, current challenges, you know, the latest by 2028 in terms of indicators. So life quality, we can have a debate about this, or what you experience, or you academic work, whatever how you would, you know, break it down and operationalize. So, for example, in Germany, one problem is housing and the prices, you know. So, for example, so maybe we have to look at inflation in certain sectors and looking at the prices of houses, rents, life quality. I just came from a conference in the UK, for example, also interesting. Social capital, I mentioned at the beginning. I think it's important to have social institutions and that you consider them, you know, by looking at areas. And, you know, it sounds very down to earth, but I like those places. Pubs, for example, in Germany. Exactly, you know, in Germany it's a big problem that, you know, pubs are closing. It's a very important place people meet. It's part of social capital. It's not an altruistic kind of, you know, institution. So, I mean, things like this, where you look at cultural institutions, you look at maybe centers for the youth and also the elderly, or, you know, that they can meet together. And you look at, let's say, also maybe as a sub-indicator, you know, what's the number of employees in research and development facilities, you know, who could, you know, be part to make sure that life quality is happening there. So just an example. And then, of course, I mentioned at the beginning, from a governance perspective, also transformation. A very key issue, I think, for all of us here, also on the panel. If you look at, let's say, the classic, let's say, structurally weak regions in Germany, and I think the picture got more complex because you have global challenges with local effects, right? So, I mean, if you look at the German automotive industry, so, I mean, of course, there you would say, oh my God, they are not really located in structurally weak regions because we're talking about the southwestern part of Germany. Stuttgart, Munich, or Bavaria part, you know, so I mean, what's the problem? The problem is it's the whole sector is, you know, in crisis, and the many subsidiaries of the automotive industry that are spread all over the country. So you want to measure also regions, you know, facing that kind of pressure of transformation, for example, by, you know, energy intensity, for example, by maybe the level of CO2 emission, so that they're basically under a lot of pressure to make that kind of transformation. And I'm sure that will remap, you know, our, let's say, allocation in a few years, because there are good arguments to say that you have to consider this also in your regional policy framework. And maybe so much as I think as a main two issues, and I think the regional policy at the end should be, I mean, as an enabler to make that kind of transition, you know, for the future.
Thank you very much, Raphael and Renata.
Okay, thank you, John. But for Poland now, for Polish government, this is quite important. The security to to even keep our way of life, to be able to travel, to be able to develop, to be able to educate. Because when we see our neighbor, this is not so so easy. This is quite easy to lose this possibility. And for us now, this is the security, the priority. And I can say that this is kind of process of transformation, because now we pay more attention to be more innovative in kind of security way, because before we didn't think about this sector, but now we more think about just create the way to secure to keep our life which is now, and to invest more in kind of drones and other innovation thing which give us the security of development. And this is way of transformation. On transformation our sector, and also pay a lot of attention to innovation in kind of army sector. And also I think that this is a way to be more coherent like in our country, and coherent in Europe as such, to be more competitive to other partners. And I think that this is the way of transformation of not only of Poland, I think of Europe as well, because the current model of globalization doesn't work, which we expected, and now this is time of change, of transformation. But I hope that we use this opportunity in the good way to make Europe more coherent, to cooperate more, to build networking between our regions, between academics and practitioners as well. Because when we more coherent, we are think that we are more resilient and we are more stronger, and now is time to be strong.
Okay, thank you very much, Renata and Duarte.
I can speak so long about governance, but I will try to be brief. My experience allowed me to say that if I have to name just... Okay, close to the micro, yeah, sorry. My experience allowed me to say that if I have to name just one critical issue for regional policy, is the design and then the effective implementation of a good governance system. Design and implementation of a good governance system. Not just design. We need to design and put in place. Let me give you some examples. European level and national level. We are discussing the challenge of European competitiveness in the global world. So the famous Draghi report, step approach, and so on and so forth. If you want to have a more competitive and balanced European Union, we need to match this approach with the regional smart specialization. Whatever is the name, I don't care about the names. I care about the idea to mobilize several skills. And we think we have a huge challenge to do so. And we need to close this gap over the next months in order to have a more meaningful regional policy or European policy. Coming to Portugal. The Portuguese government designed some years ago a program for the enhancement of the interior, so these long-distance areas. We are closing the assessment of this program. The idea is well known and well recognized for everyone. Some of the measures are relevant, but the result is nobody is happy with implementation. Why? possible explanation. We are not concluding, because the program is a very good idea with the relevant governance mechanisms on the ground. We have municipalities in the low density areas claiming for this discrimination, and in what regards their own resources on that, they cannot match this SIM decision, this decision of municipal decisions, with the discrimination of the interior. So it's not just a program for all the stakeholders, it's a program designed elsewhere that is landing in the territory. For that, we need first capacity, and capacity, because this multi-sectorial, multi-level requires different capacities, not only at a local level, also at a central level. We need to have the ability to keep the long-term view and not just reacting to everything that is moving around. Of course, we need flexibility to adapt because the context is quite volatile. But we need to keep the long-term view, and that's why this idea to have a strategy Portugal 2030, and now we need to think on creating a new strategy beyond 2030 to have the vision where we want to be in 10, 20 years' time. And then we need to keep as simple as possible. Try to avoid a different mechanisms, a different group, a different forum for each instrument. So try to build on what exists. And I think that my slide about this puzzle on who does what, these mechanisms are really an example. We try to map everything to understand if there is a better solution. And I will come up with a very concrete example for regional policy and cohesion policy. We have monitoring committees at the level of the operational programs, or the programs, it's right now the name. For the stakeholders in North to understand what are relevant for regional policy in North, they need to go for the monitoring committee of the regional programs, the monitoring committee of the 3 thematic programs, the monitoring committee of the agricultural fund, the monitoring committee of the RRP. We need to think in a different manner. They have the regional council where they should discuss that. So again, how to combine these 2 approaches is really a challenge for governance on the years to come.
Okay, thank you. Some quite clear messages there in terms of the challenges for governance, regional transformation, issues of security, issues of good governance, and particularly in terms of delivery. We're coming towards the last sort of 5 minutes or so, but are there any questions or comments? Yes, here in the middle. Again, could you say who you are?
Serafin Pathos, European Association for Innovation Local Development. Perhaps it's not it's just on the same topic of governance. Perhaps it's not you are not the best place to say provide an answer, because both the 3 models, your 3 countries, are tend to be rather holistic in terms of approach. There's a national agency, cooperative federalism in Germany, and there's a very strategic approach from Poland. But since it is very highly likely you're going to have...
So, if the acoustics aren't great, could you maybe put the microphone a bit closer to yourself?
Yeah. But however, since it's likely we are going to move to an even larger set of strategic planning, these national single plans, to which extent that will be helpful, not just to think about partnership agreement, but something much larger involving rural development, as in the previous period, but also other policies, and to which extent that will be dysfunctional. In some countries, for sure, that will be good because there's a lot of disconnect. Maybe in yours, as you have already a rather holistic approach, maybe it can be dysfunctional. So it's to which point integrating all these policies into a single plan makes sense. Perhaps it makes sense, for instance, in the single plan, which is like an ERDF, but is developed separately from cohesion policy. But I mean, what are the trade-offs in terms of having a national single plans with all these other policies lumped together into a single strategic document? Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Serafin. And one more question here.
Hi, John Goddard, Newcastle University. I was very much involved in smart specialisation, and my question is, where does that sit in the light of the new sectoral priorities, like defence and rebuilding the defence industries, dealing with the issues that are coming out of the US and the various sectors that are going to be fitted? So is RIS and all the things associated with their smart specialisation still relevant in terms of these new structural and sectoral reorientations? Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Both questions focusing on trade-offs. Who'd like to start? Renata? Or no? No?
Okay, but about smart specialization, and because I can say that in Poland we make a lot of efforts to realize this issue, but still it is quite difficult. That now when we prepare the new edition of the national regional strategy and the voivodeship strategy as well, we would like to specialize in one particular issue, but I can say that this is quite difficult. And on the other hand, when we have a kind of because Poland, this is not the specialized in one particular issue, and we also don't have some kind of, the global connection. And on the other hand, it helped us during the crisis. It helped us during the COVID problem as well. And but now our aim is to more focus on the cooperation at the European Union level and the domestic level, and build the more connection with the European Union company as well. And even now, when we use the European Union money from National Recovery Plan, we also focus on realizing this money and strengthen the European Union companies. And about multi-level governance, that I think that I explained during my presentation.
Very quick from the German side, RIS, still we consider as a best practice, has to be modified, and we would follow that way. And single plan, maybe since we only have a minute or so, for the German perspective, I can say it's problematic, even though it's out there. As I said, we are a federal country, and by our constitution, the states are responsible for implementing regional policy. There are negotiations going on between Germany, the government, and the Commission, how we implement that, a national plan approach, and I think we will find a way. But it's a challenge for any kind of federalist kind of structure, and we have to see at the end of the day how we concretely will implement it, from a governance perspective.
Quite quickly, single plan, the devil is in the details. PA, it's a kind of a single plan. So I think it's not fruitful to discuss single plan or not single plan. We need to understand better, as Raphael says, we need to understand better what could be the solutions. Because we need to combine, and I think was quite clear from my presentation, we need to combine two difficult issues: more consolidation, notably in the funding instruments, in the logic, in the strategy, with a more flexibility to find the right scale. So single plan seems to be contradictory to that, but we need to wait and see. On smart specialization, for me, smart specialization, it's a governance mechanism, and it's not a list of sectors. So smart specialization has the flexibility to adapt, and that's the idea. I'm not sure we are implementing in a very effective way all over Europe, but the idea behind is that approach. And to conclude with a concrete example, we have news recently in Portugal that one of the firms that became an unicorn, it's a firm that is producing drones for dual use. And now is one of the most important providers for military equipment for Ukraine. And this is within the approach of the specialization. So it's not just because that we don't have defense, or we don't have aeronautics, or we don't have an word. So the idea is to follow and to have these close governance mechanisms on some options to concentrate resources.
Excellent. Thank you very much for those brief responses. Unfortunately, we're running out of time and the coffee break beckons. Let me finish off with 4 brief points. The first is we've heard from policymakers from 3 European countries, but many of the issues that have been raised this morning are characteristic of many others countries, if not all countries in Europe. The second is that in facing these new challenges, there are some big gaps in terms of our state of knowledge, and there is an important research agenda here for the regional studies community to address, particularly the evolving challenges. Thirdly, something characteristic of the three ministries or agencies represented here, but I think also more broadly across Europe, is an openness in the policy-making communities to ideas, to research, to analysis, and there is a real need for research to be focusing on some of the policy questions that have been raised here. And there is huge scope for policy engagement. And I'd really encourage you, in whatever research field you are, to think about what kind of policy engagement would be possible. And lastly, of course, the Regional Studies Association has been set up partly and structured partly to ensure that crossover between the world of research, the world of academia, and the world of policy through its journals, through its conferences, through the networks, and through the grant schemes. So please do make use of these opportunities to engage. Lastly, I hope you agree, this has been a very rewarding and stimulating session. Many issues that I think we could continue to discuss. There is a spotlight session later on today looking at the future of regional policy, which will pick up on some of these issues. But could you join me in thanking our 3 speakers, our 3 panelists, for a very, very interesting session. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, Duarte has asked for 20 seconds.
Sorry it's against the protocol, but I forgot my advertisement, and John reminded me. This idea that we as a policymakers need to help from researcher and from more knowledge on that. We in the agency used to have, and will have in next weeks, a call for all the academia to produce some studies in the concrete topics that we launch, notably on population, on this idea of specialization in the carbonization. So mainly for the Portuguese participants and academia, we launch a call on that. We used to so, but it's quite in line, and you remind me, John, we need more knowledge to support decisions. Sorry.
Thank you.